Plaintiff, call your first witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. We'd like to call plaintiff Timothy Murphy to the stand.
You swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give this court will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes, sir. Go ahead and have a seat. Thank you. Excuse me, you may proceed.
Mr. Murphy, can you hear me okay if I talk this loud?
A little louder.
How about now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, just let me know if you can't hear me. Let's start off easy. Can you please state your name and spell it for the jury?
My name and?
Spell your name and state it for the jury.
Oh, my name's Timothy J. Murphy, Timothy J. Murphy. Murphy.
And Mr. Murphy, do you have any children?
I have two.
And how old are they?
My son is 30 and my daughter's 28.
And where do you currently live, Mr. Murphy?
I live on Trotter Lane in Painesville Township.
So, have you lived there? How long have you lived there for?
I believe 12 years now.
Have you always lived in Painesville Township, City of Painesville, your whole life, or no?
I lived in Painesville Township, then Painesville, then Leroy. I lived in Chardon for about 3 years, and then I came back to Painesville Township. So basically, just a little bit of time in Geauga. Most of my life I've lived in the Painesville area.
All right, and let's go back a little bit, but did you attend high school, Mr. Murphy?
Yes, I went to Riverside High School in Painesville Township.
Do you remember what year you graduated?
Yes, sir, 1978.
And what did you do after high school? Did you go back to school? Did you get a job right away? Did you take any other classes?
No, I traveled with my grandfather out west.
Where out west?
All over. I started in the northern part of the United States, went all the way across the United States down the west coast, stayed in San Diego approximately 3 to 4 weeks, and then I went to Tucson, Arizona and lived, I was there from October to May, and I then traveled the southern part of the United States and then came home for Mother's Day.
When you say travel, is it literally just traveling and sightseeing, or did you travel for any other purpose?
Nope, traveled, graduated, and left home. Graduated in June and left home in about August. And I traveled with my grandfather. He was kind of my buddy.
And would you say how long did you travel for?
I left in, it was close to a month. Close to a month to get to San Diego, Chula Vista.
And when you got back, you resided in Lake County?
Yes.
Okay. What did you do when you got back from traveling?
I actually worked out west for a few months.
Okay.
In a trailer park, basically doing like cleaning windows and fixing things, right? Like wrapping pipes, because the winter I was there happened to be the worst one they had in 50 years. Just minor stuff. It wasn't anything heavy lifting. There was none of that.
How old were you at that time?
I would have been 20.
And then you got back to Lake County. How old were you then?
I got back, I got back in May, around Mother's Day. I was still 20.
Okay, so you're gone less than a year for traveling?
Yes.
And then, so you're back, you're 20, you graduated from high school.
Yes.
You're back in Lake County. What did you do next? Did you go to school? Did you get a job?
No, I was off for a while. I did not have a driver's license at that period of my life, so I ended up going to work for my uncle in, I want to say it was August or September of 1979.
Okay, what were you doing for your uncle?
I laid asphalt.
And how How long did you do that for?
Off and on for my uncle, about 5 years, 5 to 6 approximately.
And is that a trade that you learned from your uncle?
Yes.
Any other jobs with him? Mostly asphalt or?
I worked, I went back out west for a few months and worked out west doing asphalt and concrete work. I actually ran crews doing the same type of work. It was more, it was kind of half and half. I did a lot of form work, grade work, not too much tamp work or any of that. A lot of, there was some digging and backfilling and things like that. A lot of machinery was used back then when I traveled out west to work, not as much up here.
And you mentioned, I know we'll get more into detail about it too, but what's tamp work? What does that mean?
Well, out west, I basically used a vibrating tamper. It's a flat tamper. It's about that long, about that wide. So about 12 to 18 wide and 2 foot long. You put oil on it and then it'll tamp down the asphalt to grade level.
So it involves pouring the asphalt and tampering it with the machine?
Yeah, first of all, you clean the hole, make sure it's as level as you can get. You clean the hole out with brooms. You tar the inside of the holes so that the asphalt will stick and keep the material in place, and then you'll tamp it. And then after you tamp it, most likely you'll get some creases, so you'll have to hand tamp it. Hand tamp is about 8 inches wide by 8 inches wide. Takes a lot of force to knock down the creases.
You're talking about the handheld tamper?
Yes.
8 by 8?
That's got a 4 foot handle on it. Some are wood, which are a little lighter, and they can go anywhere from 15 to 20 pounds.
You would physically tamp it down, the asphalt, to smooth it out?
Right. Each 2 inches of asphalt you put in a hole gets tamped down to 1.5 inches. So if it's so say you have a 4-inch hole, you have to knock 6 inches down to 4 inches to make it level. So that's a lot of tamping in a daytime.
So you said you worked with your uncle in asphalt for about 5 years?
It was off and on for 5 years.
Off and on for 5 years?
Correct.
During that off and on period, is that when you went out west?
Sometimes I went out west to just see my grandfather or driving back home, because at that point he was getting older. So I'd go and drive him back home, and we'd travel around the country a little bit. And then the one time I worked out west for, can't remember exactly. I remember telling the dates, but I don't remember off the top of my head right now, because I was coming and going during that period of time. I worked out there from, I want to say September. It was September to May, the 1 year.
And you said, you testified before that when you go out west,
Yes.
was it one time or multiple times you led crews?
Pardon?
You led a crew?
Yes.
Was that multiple times or one time when you went out west?
Just the one time. The other time I worked with some other folks.
And was that for a private company? Was that for a city? What was that?
It was for private companies.
So you testified before you learned asphalt from working with your uncle.
Correct.
And when you went out west, you worked with concrete too. Is that
Yes.
similar in terms of your training, or was that something you learned out west?
At the training I'm sorry. I learned the concrete work out west. My uncle did a little bit, but he always hired somebody. But I would end up doing form work and jackhammer work so they could pour it. I can only think of maybe twice that we poured concrete while I worked for my uncle. We just didn't pour a lot of concrete. The company name was Murphy Asphalt Paving. So we basically did asphalt seal coating type work, parking lots, driveways.
And how long did that last for? Was that the 5-year period, or is that the 5 years
No.
you mentioned before was just with your uncle?
It would, the general season, we would start like at the end of March, between March 15th and April 1st, and the season would last until usually around Thanksgiving or December 1st when they close the asphalt plants down. You can't do asphalt after 50 degrees, because what happens is the asphalt will crystallize. You'll freeze all the tars and oils in it, and it just breaks apart.
So during that time where it was below 50 degrees, you couldn't do the asphalt, were you working anywhere else? Were you working at any other type of
No.
job?
There's 2 seasons. One where I plowed snow. The other one was just, it wasn't a bad winter, so I didn't do a whole lot. A lot of times I would go out west for a month or 2, see my grandfather, or I'd go down in the fall, pick him up, bring him home. So I wasn't actually working other than that 1 year.
So is it fair to say you're working, you know, obviously you worked from high school leading into, I'm going to ask you about the city of Painesville, but during those years you worked asphalt, you did some concrete work, you did some plowing.
Yes.
But you didn't have a full duty employment with a city or a company during that time period?
No. The most I ever made was the 1 year was $10,000, and that was working out west and working here in Ohio.
So let's get into it. When did you first start working for the city of Painesville?
I started working for the city of Painesville in, I believe it was July 9th of 1984.
Was that your first full-duty position, full-time job with the company?
Yes,
In this case, the city?
yes.
And so you testified before about your experience working with asphalt and concrete. What did you get hired into at the city?
I got hired into Painesville City Street Department. They were looking for an asphalt man, and I just happened to have the trade under my belt before I got there.
Was it a full-duty position?
Yes.
And so you were hired, you said asphalt, you can't do that year-round. What were your overall duties? What was your job title? What were your duties as a worker for the city?
Well, when I first started, I was a maintenance worker 1, which is pretty much a grunt. You do everything. You use every hand tool under the sun. A lot of picking, a lot of shoveling, which actually the picking, shoveling, it went my whole 31-year career. In the spring and summer, there was a lot of that. There was a lot of street cleaning by hand because they rolled the street sweeper before I got there, but the summer before. So we would basically go out on the roads, and I would go in front of the front end loader and shovel all the piles up, out of the gutter, and we'd start that in March, April, and it'd be frozen, so you'd be beating on it, shoveling it in piles. And then when I get shoveling piles, I had other people go in front of me, and I'd have to come back, and then I'd load every pile into the front end loader. Sometimes I'd have a welfare worker with me. Sometimes I did it by myself. By myself, I would load a dump truck and load between a dump truck load and another half in one day by myself with no help because we were shorthanded. That would go on for approximately 3 months. Every day for 3 months. You're out there beating it and getting it to move. That was usually the spring started that way, and then we had cleanup where we'd have to pick up brush. Back when I first started doing brush for the city, we threw it all on the back of a truck by hand. So a lot of repetitious with just those 2 jobs. We'd also clean catch basins, and I would do 6 or 7 pickup loads a day. I'd have there was a guy that drove, and he'd stop at every catch basin, and I'd shovel it on, I'd shovel it off. That was usually, during the rainy season. If you get a rainy day, you can't make the asphalt, you couldn't do the potholes. Then we'd go into potholes. So I do anywhere from 200 to 500, 600 potholes a day. And the potholes are deep, so if it's 4 inches, I had to pound 6 inches with the tamper down into the ground. Of course, first I'd sweep them all out because put in asphalt mix with anything that's loose comes back out. So you're talking, even if you have a 1 foot by 1 foot hole, you have, the tamp is 8 by 8 and you're overlapping it by 2 inches. So you got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 there, 5. So you got about 10 to 15 tamps. Depends if it goes all the way down. If it doesn't go all the way down, you got to keep beating it until it's smooth. And then we'd have.
I'm going to cut you off right there. So
Yes, sir.
Make sure we're staying on track. This is when you're first hired.
Yes.
With the, so a maintenance worker 1, as you
Correct.
testified. You were doing potholes at that time, asphalt.
Yes.
You testified to the cleaning. You mentioned before shoveling and picking. Was that street cleaning, and were you doing like lawn work too at that time?
No. We only did usually the lawn work was only if we put in concrete or a driveway apron or whatever, where it would get ripped up. So then we'd have to grade it off and fix it.
Okay. So let's give the jury just a picture. You got hired as a maintenance worker 1. We'll get into more details later.
Okay.
But what would you say your top 3 jobs? Obviously, you worked a lot of jobs, a lot of duties at being a
Correct.
maintenance worker. What were your top 3 jobs that you do routinely?
Routinely? Asphalt, number 1. And then we go to coal patch, which run after that, so you got tamping in both jobs. I guess you'd put them together because they're asphalt, coal patch, it's pretty similar. You have the leaves and where you throw 12 to 1,800 bags of leaves a day in the fall. And then I would say I did a lot of mowing my last 5 years. Lots of mowing and picking up trash.
And what about during the winter? What would you normally do then?
Plowing snow and coal patch.
You could do cold patch. I
Yes.
guess I should ask, because I don't know all the details. What exactly is cold patch?
Coal patch is the cold version of hot mix, but they take out the tars and some of the oils.
So is that kind of a Band-Aid fix-up job for potholes during the winter?
Correct. If you cleaned out the holes and you tamped them in well, they could last 3 or 4 months.
Okay.
But if you didn't, they come right back out.
That did not involve using a roller? Just
No, there was no roller, because if you run the roller in the winter, it's the rolls, or the drums, I'm sorry, are full of water. So, I mean, I was outside when it was -20 and -30 doing cold patch. So if you get outside, it'll freeze the drum and crack it, and then you've lost your 1.5 ton roller. And the drums are very, very expensive.
So how long were you a maintenance worker 1 for?
Approximately a year, and they moved me up because I was already doing well above my position. They did like a wage reclassification and looked at all the job descriptions and then moved me up.
So then what were you, would you say it was a promotion? Or just a change in title?
No, it was just yeah, I guess you could call it a kind of a promotion.
So
I'm making a few more bucks. I mean, I guess you would call it a promotion
Okay.
in that respect.
What was your title then after that?
It was called a maintenance worker too, which just kept doing more. You just got paid a little better.
So did any of your duties change in terms of what you were doing or how much you were doing? Did anything change from being a maintenance worker 1 to a maintenance worker 2?
Yes, I was, at that point, I was allowed to run more equipment, heavy equipment. As a maintenance worker 1, I could run the rollers. you know, the jackhammers, those type of power tools. I could run pretty much any power tool or any other tool as a maintenance worker one. When you got moved, and I could drive a 1.5 ton dump truck as a maintenance worker one. When I moved up to maintenance worker two, then I drove the big trucks and front end loaders, sewer jets, tar distributors, Craftco machines, which Craftco machines is actually the tar machines that they use to put down tar to fill cracks. Let's see here. What else did I run? I basically ran everything they had. Grader.
You mean in terms of equipment and machines?
Yep, I ran everything we had.
So I don't want to oversimplify, but maintenance worker 1 to maintenance worker 2 is you run more machines, more power tools than
Right.
what you were allowed to run as a maintenance worker.
Correct. But the thing was, because the age of the workers at the time, I was basically a glorified one. They were all usually 5 to 10 years older than me, and I'd already had 10 to 15 years service in. So I basically, for the first 15 years, I was basically the grunt.
When again were you promoted to maintenance worker 2?
It would have been, I believe, 1985.
So about a year after you got hired?
About a year, 18 months.
And I know you talked about some of the tools
Yes.
and equipment that you use, but obviously it's very pertinent and important to this case. Do you remember what tools you used as a maintenance worker 2 during your time with the city? Can you just generally list those, and I'll ask you some specifics about them?
Okay. Pick, a mattock, hand tamp, shovels, cordless drills, ratcheting drills, lots of pliers, lots of hand tools that you had to use to, twist wire, things like that for snow fences, a pounder to pound in snow fences, the stakes that go on snow fences. Oh my goodness.
So let me ask you, you mentioned a hand tamper before that we went over.
Yes.
Are there electric and diesel tampers as well?
There's gasoline ones, which I ran, gasoline ones that had a flat tamp, and then we had ones that were what they call as a foot tamper. They have like a foot on it, about like that. And what it does is you have to hold on to it to tamp the areas, and it just bounces up and down, and it just jerks the heck out of your wrists and hands, and it's very uncomfortable. Your hands go numb, and it's not fun. The jackhammers, we'd run a jackhammer all day. Your hands would go numb, shake it off. Sometimes it took a couple hours for them to quit being numb. The Craftco machine, which again was the tar machine, you'd be on that 7-8 hours. Then you'd have to take a ball valve and go like this all day. And that would last usually 2 or 3 months when we're filling cracks. The tar distributor, the same thing.
Let me ask you too, because I know there's a lot of tools, a lot of different jobs.
Correct.
In a typical, I know you didn't have a typical schedule, correct?
Pardon?
You didn't have a typical schedule at work. It was as needed?
Yes. I mean, when you started a season, you're pretty well pigeonholed into that whatever job. So asphalt started in the spring, and it run to December, and then when that was done, that included all the tamping, raking, bent over, and then it would move on to the coal patch until the leaves came,
Okay.
and then you'd start with the leaves.
Well, let's go with the asphalt, filling in the potholes.
Yes.
So season would start. What does a typical week look like for you doing asphalt?
Okay. Typical week, depended on if there had been water breaks or any kind of sewer breaks that needed repair, then you would have to fix the, of course, they'd let them settle, they'd let them settle. They'd dig them out, let the stone in it, and let them settle down before I got to them. And then I'd go back and clean them up, grade them up.
What does that entail? Cleaning, grading them up?
Sometimes that were days, depending on how many you had. I mean, there was times I do 10 in a week.
Physically, what do you do to do that? I know we're not,
I
don't think all of us are used to that terminology.
First of all, I'm going to go in and rake out the large stones so they don't come back up through the asphalt. I'm going to grade it off by hand with a 6-foot long rake with a 3-foot handle, similar to a regular garden rake, but it's a lot heavier. And it's got teeth like this to pull out the heavy stuff, and then you go back and use the other side and rake it down, smooth it out. And then you sweep it all out by hand, and then you would take tar and put along the edges, and then you'd fill it. And that's what I would do all day long for sometimes 2-3 weeks on end. When it got done with that, if we had potholes all over, we'd start on a road and do potholes, and we could be on a street for a couple days, we could be on the street for a week, and it'd be the same thing. You sweep them all out by hand. When I first started there, we used tar, and they decided that was not practical because it took too long, so then that's when we'd use the regular roller on stuff like that.
So in a typical week, how much of your time was used either on a machine or using some kind of tool, either handheld or power?
All day. 8 hours.
And let's make a distinction between a hand tool such as a rake versus a power tool that you use. You testified to jackhammers, drills. How often in your position would you have to use one of those power tools?
Oh, the power tools. It all depended on the project. I mean, pretty much for the first 15 years, they left me on asphalt. I mean, I was there every day. So it meant shoveling, sweeping, using the pick to clean out the edges of the hole. So it was all manual. The power tools, we'd use that when we had to do the freeway. Painesville City used to have Route 2 for the first 12 or 15 years I was working for them. So we'd be picking up trash all day long for, again, it could be a month we're up there. I could be on that detail, or I could be on the coal patch detail, depend who came in to work that day. So those things changed, but for the most part, I was always bent over a rake. The machinery part, a lot of times during the first part of the spring, I'd get thrown in the garage, or in the winter, I'd be out taking the 300-pound steel blades off, and there was always two steel blades. I'd be helping the mechanics because they didn't trust anybody else, so they always went up front and said, "Hey, we want Murph," and go, "Oh, okay." So there was a lot of things doing. You're cleaning things up with diesel fuels. What do they call it? All I can think of is Agent Orange, but that's not what they call it. It's a degreaser. I'm sorry. It won't take the degreaser had to be used with the diesel fuel to take all the tars and oils off the machines. So we basically used putty knives. They didn't let us use any machines or hand tools for that. So we would take a 1-inch and a 2-inch putty knife or scraper and scrape everything down, and then open the bins of the asphalt trailer and scrape them down by hand, heat it up, stuff like that. The regular power tools were to take off the blades, so you'd have to stick a bar in, and then they'd ratchet them all off. So while you're holding the pin against the nut, they'd be going bam, 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 and you're trying to hold the head of the hammer or a pin against it to keep it from moving. So,
Judge, permission to approach Mr. Murphy with an exhibit?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy, giving you what's been labeled Joint Exhibit 4.
yes, sir.
I'm not going to have you read all over that specifically, but can you tell the jury what that is?
What this is?
Yeah.
This is a general description of the work that was actually, this is actually upgraded from the one I got in 1983. But it pretty much explains everything. Not, let me take that back. Explains most of what I did.
Well, what is it a job description of?
This is a job description of what I did working for the city of Painesville.
So a maintenance worker too?
Correct.
Okay. And does that generally, I'll ask some details, but does that generally seem like a fair and accurate description of what your job duties were?
It's not all, but it's close.
Well, then let's get into that a little bit. But if you can read, it lists some power tools and some machines.
Okay.
You mentioned some of those. Can you just glance over those real quick and point out any that you didn't testify to before?
Yes, there are a couple.
Okay. And what are those?
One of them is asphalt paver.
What is that?
It's what we only use once in a blue moon because we didn't have one. But when Daniel's brothers would come in, the city would contract them and they'd supply the manpower. So we would work with contractors that come in. So I would either run on one side of the machine and then rake down the edges and make sure that the seams were flat and rolled in. And when the trucks pulled out, then I would take and fill the box, make it side to side, make sure the asphalt was even across. So if they opened the screed or the arms, it would come out on either side and fill in whatever was missing. The other thing was called a stone box. The stone box was used for tar and chip. When I first started in the city, probably the first 10 or 12 years in the summer, they went to tar and chip because a lot of the roads do not have great base underneath. So a lot of times the base was bank gravel or worse. So what they would do is tar the roads with the tar distributor, and when they did that, then we would follow in a box, and there would be a truck hooked up in the back of the box. Well, for many years, when there wasn't an operator to do the front, or I'm sorry, I would be in the back of the box holding on tight as we're going down the road or going from job to job, so it's just rattling like this. So my job was to guide the trucks, make sure they didn't hit any wires, and then get off when they stopped and fill any spots they missed and make sure the box was flat across. It was a long day. So when later on, like the last 5 years up until I used it, then I got put on the front of the box. So that meant running the bands. They have bands that run from the back of the box to bring the gray 8s or whites, which are little stones like that, come up the belts, goes into the front box. So as it's filling up the front box, I have to take the chutes and turn them this way or that way to fill up the whole, what was it, 12? 16. 12 or 16 foot. So as they're going down the road, I'm running from one side of the box to the other side of the box to make sure everything's flowing. If I missed it, and then you'd have a long stretch of tar that wasn't covering the road, and then you got problems because then the machine would start picking it up, and then you'd have a mess. Another thing I would be running was sewer jets.
What are those?
Sewer jet cleans out your catch basin by sucking it out, or if you have a clog in your line, I'd be out there opening manholes and then pounding the line until it cleared out.
What's again, we're not all familiar with the terminology.
Okay.
Pounding the line, is it like, I'm picturing a big vacuum?
It's about,
Big vacuum hose or no?
it's a large hose that will run 500 to 1,000 feet long, and you pump, I think it's 30, I think we pump, some of them will go over 2,200 PSI through the line.
So it's water running through it?
Yes.
Flush things out?
And it'll break up whatever's in the line.
And how many men or workers would hold that in order to use the hose?
One
Is
guy.
that something, is it vibrating, is it moving while you're
Yes,
using it?
it vibrates because the water's 2,200 PSI going through it, so it vibrates like this.
Okay. How often would you have to use that?
Again, I wasn't on that very often, but I did a lot of opening manholes and inspecting them. You'd have to beat them with a sledgehammer to open them. So when a storm was coming, or we'd had a storm, usually I would do that once a week.
Okay. So fairly regular, but
Yes.
it wasn't, not as routine or regular as asphalt or concrete?
No, I was on it, but I wasn't married to it, as you want to say.
I saw there's some other ones, weed whackers, trimmers.
I was
whatever
on
you
the
wanna
weed
call them.
whackers a lot.
Okay. How,
I was on the bit.
What's a lot?
Mostly it would come and go. I'd be on it for a solid week. I wouldn't get off of it. And that would go, because I was on the mowing, I would also be on the weed whacker. So I'd also be picking up trash, which they had hand pickers, which you wouldn't think they would bother your hands, but they do. After you do thousands of pieces of garbage, your hands would really irritate you.
Now, when I hear hand picker for trash, is it something where you squeeze and it's like
Yes.
a claw?
Yes, it's got a, kind of looks like that. And stands about 3 foot. And it's got like a handle up here. So you have to keep going like this. You have to pick it up, and then when you throw it away, you have to let it go. So it'll dump it in the bag. So I did a lot of that too. In fact, I did probably 3 times more of that than the regular weed whacker. Because usually when I went to mow, I was by myself. So I always have to take the machine off, put it back on, set up the road signs. And in a day, I could get 8 or 10 bags of trash to fill them up, and you pick it up stuff that's about the size of a matchbox. So I did a lot of that over the
You
years.
testified you could be on lawns, whatever terminology you used, mowing for a week.
Yes.
If you were on lawns and lawn care for a week, how much of that in a typical day is mowing, using the trimmer / weed whacker versus garbage picking? What's a typical day look like for that?
Using a picker, it'd probably be about 2 hours.
Okay.
The weed whacking, I didn't do a lot of the weed whacking when I did the mowing. It was after I did the mowing.
Okay.
So then I would be on it anywhere from 3 days to a week.
Well, I'm talking about a typical day. I mean, there's
Oh, a
difference
typical
between
day?
Using a weed whacker for 20 minutes, I know personally, versus being out there for 2 hours.
In a typical day, if I was out there picking up mowing by myself, it would be 2 hours of picking up trash and then 6 hours on the mower,
Okay.
on the zero turn.
And what's a zero turn mower?
A zero turn mower is just a mower that you can flip it around like this and do circles or donuts. It goes up and down. It's, how do I explain it? Vibrates a lot, I can tell you that. And when you're mowing, a lot of landscapers use them. If you see them out mowing yards and things, large yards, usually they have a zero turn.
That's what I was going to ask. So is it a mower designed for large areas?
Large areas,
Okay.
correct.
And would all of them vibrate, or just the one that the city had?
No, they all vibrate. They all, and the thing is, when you're doing properties, the properties aren't smooth. They're not manicured. You know, like I used to mow the freeway. It's not manicured. You know, it's rough. So when you were done, you knew you were beat up. You know, it's just part of the job.
I know this is a little tedious, but it is important. Any other job duties or machines or power tools on the job description that
Nope.
we didn't talk about yet?
I didn't see chainsaws, and I run a lot of chainsaws.
Okay, why would you run a chainsaw? And I know what a chainsaw is, just for
We
reference.
would do it we would do this, usually spring and toward fall, because what would happen is, as you're driving down the road with your dump trucks, the branches would catch your mirrors and break the mirrors, and the mirrors are like $200-300 a pop. So we would typically do that, clean up along the roads from the tree lawns, and also if there was a bad storm, there was times I was out there running chainsaws for a week on end, just to clean up, get the stuff out of the road. And then we would use a chipper to chip it all up.
The chipper that we use, I'm picturing a chipper that the city workers, kind of like on a trailer that's being pulled, is that right?
The chipper was usually on a box truck. So also in the spring spring cleanup and fall cleanup, we would run that. Could go for a month. So you'd stick everything through the chipper, and again, another piece of equipment that vibrated. I mean, it was what it was. The chainsaws, we had 18-inch chainsaw blades. We had 36-inch chainsaw blades. I did not like the 36-inch ones. They were rough.
Why is that?
Number one is trying to hold them, because I'm a little guy, okay? They're heavy, they're very heavy, and after 8 hours of running one, you don't want to run one again for months, because they just beat you up. They're hard on the elbows, the hands, the back. They're just too big.
And when you're listing those body parts, we'll get more into it as well, but what do you mean by they would beat you up?
Well, when you get done, your joints and things would just ache. You know, being bent over because it's so top heavy this way. You know, your hands would hurt. They'd go numb. You know, it's just constant vibrating. You know, just vibrating. 8 hours, and the only breaks you would get are 10-15 minutes. You get a lunch, which is good, but out of an 8-hour day, you're running a chainsaw for 6.5 hours.
And when you would have to run a chainsaw that much in one day, are we talking that you'd be on, we'll just say, chainsaw duty for a day or two, or was it stretched out to a week, depending on the job?
It could go a couple of weeks. It depends what kind of storm damage you had. I mean, I've seen it where I'd be on it for 3 weeks, solid, never get off of it. It all depended on, if you have a big ice storm, that was the worst, because everything would come down, and then you'd be out there for days.
With the chainsaw?
And weeks, yes.
Picking up anything that was
Yep.
falling over?
Usually, I would do the chainsaw, and after the chainsaw work, and I'd help run it through the chipper.
And any other tools or anything that you see on that description that we didn't talk about yet?
Yeah, there's a lot of, I would say, mechanical type tools that the mechanic would use, that I had to use.
Such as?
Like I said, I forget what they call them. Gotta forgive me a minute, I got it.
Let me ask, you
Trying to
mentioned
think what the-
pliers before, correct?
Yes.
What would you have to use pliers for?
I would have to use the pliers to tie down snow fence. Typically, when I first started, the first 12 or 15 years, we did about 200 to 220 rolls of snow fence before winter. So we would have 5-foot stakes that we had to put in. Each roll we'd have to use five stakes for each roll. So of those 200 rolls, I'd have to pound in 1,000 stakes. With
Is that with a sledgehammer?
With a pounder. You put your hands through it, you beat it down, and the pounders were 20, 25 pounds a piece. After you get the snow fence up, you'd have to pull it tight, and then I would take, we took the electrical lines, the scrap that the line shop would use, and I'd cut it in 14 to 16-inch pieces, cut it, and then it had a metal galvanized rod in the middle. The rest of it was kind of hardened aluminum, so you'd have to take like something hard, like a post or pole, and then you'd have to beat it. So after about 10 or 12 beatings, you could twist it and get it apart. So each post had 3 ties on it, so that's 15, and then you had 8 to 10 more through the rest of it. So you'd have 25 ties per each 50-foot roll of fence you put up. So you take that and multiply it times 200. That's a lot of beating. And that went on about 15 years, and then it slowly drifted away because city come up with a agreement with Lake County where we no longer plowed Route 2 and 44. So that then there was no more mowing. There was no more of the putting up the snow fence. We would put snow fence up basically when they had party in the park. So we would put about 50 to 70 rolls up there until I retired.
So let me ask you this. So
Yes.
your jobs, you just described a lot of jobs,
Yes,
a lot
sir.
of different tools,
Yes, sir.
a lot of different timings in terms of how long you were on a specific job for, correct?
Yes,
Is that
sir.
fair? So I'll ask you, was any part of your job, any duties that you had with the city, just in general, was any of it not physical work?
The only time it wasn't physical is when the secretary would call off, I would get to sit in the office for a day or two, and I would man the phones to go to different departments. Or on a Saturday when I first started, it went on for, I want to say 15 years. Every 7 or 8 Saturdays, I would have to do a watchman's job. because they gave me a Monday off. Basically, that was when you were doing that job, you were doing cleaning. So you'd be cleaning the tables and the bathrooms and stuff, which to me, that was a picnic. But when the secretary would be off, then I would man the phones and do the oops.
Besides those exceptions, those seem to be more exceptions than typical duties, correct?
Right.
What was the least physical job that you had routinely at the city?
Wasn't one.
If you had to pick one.
Probably sit in the office and answer the phones.
But that was
Transfer.
That was the exception.
Yes. It didn't happen very often.
Okay. What was something that you did very often that you would categorize as the least physical job?
I guess flagging traffic, other than it was hard on the wrist, but flagging traffic was probably, I mean, it was hard to stand there all day because your feet would start to bug you, but that would be the least physical job that I ever did there.
And how often would you do that?
Not often, because I was pretty much ran a crew or I was by myself, with somebody else.
What's not often? Is that a week a year? Is that every other week? Just to get some idea.
The only time I really flagged a ton of traffic is when I came back from my injuries.
Okay. All right, and let's get into that then. So I'll ask you right now, Mr. Murphy, are you still working for the city of Paynesville?
No, sir, I am not.
When did you stop working?
I retired of, actually, I say it's January 1 of 2016, but it would be the 31st of 15.
Yeah, and I think even later you'll see testimony that December 31st, 2015, early January, it's all the same to you, correct?
Right. That's when I retired.
Okay. Do you remember the last time you physically worked for the city? Was it on those dates or was it a little time before that?
No, I think I was actually trying to remember. Because my birthday is December 30th. I believe I was off on the 30th. And I believe I went back on the 31st.
Okay, so it was close. So it wasn't,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I took my birthday off.
Okay, well, that's let the record show he took his birthday off. So, Mr. Murphy, from being hired in 84,
Yes, sir.
1984 until your retirement, late December 2015, early 2016, are there any other jobs that you worked at besides the city of Paynesville?
I worked for St. Mary's for a couple months. Had to be before I paid my house off, which was 07. And basically, I just pruned their trees and used a hand mower.
How long did that go on for?
2 months, maybe 3.
Okay. So
Not long.
No other jobs you can think of?
Just one other job, and I took care of a guy's property for a couple years. I think I worked it was another one. It was kind of off and on.
What would that entail, just generally?
I'm sorry, I'm trying not to laugh. The man had a lot of parties, so I used to pick up after the parties.
Like housekeeping stuff?
Just outside. He had a lot of property, and up where his house was, he a lot of parties. So I would come in and work 3-4 hours, clean up his parties, and he had a big Kubota mower, and I had a couple trail mowers you put behind it. So I'd sit on that mower and just mow.
How long did that go on for?
Off and on for about a few years.
2 or 3 years or more than that?
I'd say 3,
And
maybe 4. But it was only during the summer months. Was nothing. Wasn't really strenuous or anything.
so a few months every year for a few years.
Yep.
And
Yeah,
what would be the difference between, I'll ask you to strike that. Was there any difference between mowing for that job as opposed to the city that you described before?
Yeah, the mower is a hell of a lot bigger.
Now, is that,
A Kubota is a large machine, which doesn't bounce like a small zero-turn radius mower.
okay, so it's difference in terms of how the job is getting done?
Power, production. I mean, to do his property only took like 3 hours, and it was done.
Was it on the same scale of vibrating or anything?
No, there was no
Zero turn?
vibrating. Had a steering wheel.
Any other power tools or machinery that you would use during that job?
No, basically, he didn't have any pickers, so I picked up the trash by hand, bending over. A little bit of shoveling here and there.
You said nothing, strike that. Was it on the same level as physicality as working for the city?
No, no.
What was the big difference, just so you can explain?
There wasn't any, I didn't use any hand tools. There was a couple of younger fellows that worked there that were in their 20s. They were college kids, so they did all the heavy lifting. They took care of all the heavy work. So all I basically had to do is mow, clean up, prune a few branches, pick his vegetables. I mean, it's pretty easy.
Okay, all right. So you retired in 2015. How old are you right now?
I will be 64 December 30th.
I'm going to make you do some math. Do you remember how old you were when you retired?
I would have been, I just turned 56.
Did you take early
Wait a
retirement?
minute. Wait a minute. Yeah, I just turned 55, because I'd have been 56 and 55, I believe.
I wouldn't trust my math either. I have 56.
Yeah, gotta think about it.
But either way, I guess the important point is, was that your normal retirement date, or did you take an early retirement?
No, I retired early. I did not want to retire. I just couldn't do it anymore.
And what couldn't you do?
I couldn't get on my hands and knees anymore. My hands were failing me because I was dropping a lot of stuff. My other injuries, neck, low back, just all caught up with me. I just figured it's time to go.
And let's talk about those other injuries just for a little bit. It was alluded to before about a knee injury.
Yes.
Just describe to the jury generally what happened, just so they have an idea of time frame of everything, but what happened to your knees?
Okay. On 11/13 of 2014, I worked 16 hours plowing snow for the city. I got off, went home, got a couple hours of sleep, came back to work, and set up an 816-pound steel plate because they had knocked the road plate off the road, or actually they knocked a manhole cover off the road. They took it right out of the ground with the plow. So I set up everything, and my supervisor inadvertently hit the lever and dropped a steel plate on my knees, crushing both of them. Tore my left meniscus, destroyed my patella in my right knee. I went in renal failure, congestive heart failure, 2 massive embolisms in my lungs, and I was given the last rites. So,
And we'll stop right there. That happened November 2014.
yes.
Now let's get into, did you have any prior neck issues?
Yes.
Okay, what happened there?
During my employment with the city of Painesville, I'd been rear-ended or sideswiped between 8 and 10 times. So they've given me some issues.
Do you know what you've been diagnosed with in the neck?
Yeah, I have herniations, bulges, narrowing of the spine, spurs now. Got all kinds of fun.
What about the low back?
Low back, I'm not sure if the low back has been herniated or bulging. I have issues back there too.
Is that from the same reference to being sideswiped as the neck, or is that different?
No, it's totally different.
In what way? In how it happened, or?
Yeah, how it happened.
And how did it happen?
My low back got injured while I was working for my uncle. He decided that everybody that worked for him, he didn't want to hurt his backhoe, so he made us pick up this 2x6x4 piece of concrete with asphalt on it, about 12 inches deep. And I said, hey, we need the loader. He says, look, you're either going to load it by hand or you're going to get fired. I go, great. So the three guys picked it up. I only weighed about 160 pounds. The two guys with me were like 240, 260 pounds. They dropped their ends. I held on to keep it from breaking my feet, and then I messed up my back. And then I thought it was cleared up, and I worked for the city of Painesville. I wasn't having a whole lot of problems until when I went for the city of Painesville, they did not use, they had these old trucks, and they were from the 70s. Well, they had no, what do you call it, suspension seats, hydraulic seats. And they'd send three guys out to work in these dump trucks. Well, I was a little guy. So they made, because you couldn't get two people in a seat, or if you did, you were half your butt sitting on the seat while the other guy is up against the window. Well, that didn't work because you had people that were a whole lot bigger than I am, so they took the whole seat. So I would have to take a piece of plywood and sit where all the controls are of the dump truck. That went on for years, about 5 years.
So it aggravated your back?
Oh, God, yes,
The
every day.
initial injury, you said that was working for your uncle, so that was before the city?
Correct.
So we'll talk more about the neck and the knees a little bit in just a few moments, but just so the jury knows, before the issue that's before us today, the carpal tunnel, have you ever had any direct trauma to your wrists or your hands working at the city?
The only thing I had was two of my coworkers in about 2008. We were cleaning a catch basin. Somebody had complained and said it was rattling outside the front of their house. And so I went and popped it up, and I told the two gentlemen to hold on to it. So I'm taking my fingers and cleaning it out. Well, they dropped it on my fingers. Broke two of them, fractured two of them, and so now I have very little feeling in these three fingers.
And we'll talk more about it. I feel like I keep saying that, but the issues you had from that injury, you said about 2008, are those in any way, shape, or form, in your opinion, the same type of symptoms you have from carpal tunnel?
No, none at all.
Okay.
None at all.
Are you still having lack of feeling in your fingers because of that injury?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I'm going to get into some medical conditions, and I just want to ask you whether or not you've ever been diagnosed with them, but I'll ask you generally. Besides the injuries we talked about, the herniations, the bulges, obviously the carpal tunnel is going to be the big one, but have you ever been diagnosed with any other kind of medical conditions?
The only thing I've ever been diagnosed with is it's called a primary platelet disorder. So most people's platelets are, I don't know, 250 to 600,000. My platelets aren't like that. So mine are, I've had them up between, they go anywhere from 128 to 100, oh my God, what was it? 168,000, I think, which makes it where most people heal okay. I don't heal. Or what'll happen is, say you cut yourself, and you know how it'll heal up and be flush, and you won't have a dent. I'll have a dent. If they put stitches in, it rolls open. With that, which I'm surprised I actually clotted, because I don't clot.
When were you diagnosed with that?
About 10 years ago. I never even knew I had it.
About 2012?
About 10 or 12, yes.
And did the doctors ever tell you what that's from? Is that just something that developed?
He said it was hereditary, but I don't have any of my family with it. So I don't know how I got it.
Okay. And you just described kind of the symptoms of having that blood disorder. Does that stop you in any way in terms of doing anything day to day?
No, I'm just careful of what I do.
And has that affected any kind of treatment that you may or may not have gotten in regards to any injury?
Yes, it does affect treatment that I can do. Number one is surgery. So I basically, from all the doctors, I pretty well got to be life or death. And that comes from my hematologist, oncologist. So it's one of those things. You kind of just skirt it and keep moving.
I don't want to overgeneralize too. Is that due to the clotting issue? Is that why it would be so dangerous?
Yes. Yes, they're afraid that, number one, I'll either bleed to death, depending on what the surgery is, or that I will throw another clot.
All right. And Mr. Murphy, I'm going to ask you some questions about other conditions. Have you ever been diagnosed or told that you might have rheumatoid arthritis?
Never, sir.
Have you ever been given the diagnosis of obesity?
No.
Have you ever gone to the doctor and they told you that you were at least overweight?
Yeah, they've said that. They said slightly.
Slightly overweight?
Slightly.
No talks of obesity or anything?
No.
Okay. Hypothyroidism?
No, I've been checked for that numerous times. I do not have it.
Okay. Any thyroid issues at all that you're aware of?
Excuse me. No, sir.
Okay. What about diabetes?
No, sir.
Have you been checked for diabetes or no?
Yes.
Okay. When was the last time?
Probably maybe a year ago. It had to be before this new insurance, I'm guessing.
And any type of autoimmune disease, any autoimmune condition that you're aware of?
No, sir. No.
What is your blood disorder? What is that actually, what category does that actually fall under?
It's called a primary platelet disorder. And I have no idea, there's 71 different ones from what my hematologist, oncologist said. He does not know what it is, and to get tested is really expensive.
And the next question might be a little silly, but it'll be important later. Have you ever had any hormonal replacement theory treatment?
No, sir. No.
Are you a smoker?
No.
Have you ever
Sir.
smoked?
No, sir.
Not even a little? 1 cigarette, 2 cigarettes?
No, sir.
Okay. So you never smoked and you didn't have to quit or anything? Okay.
No, sir.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you, we talked a lot about your history, your job history with the city. We talked about your medical history. I'm going to try to put a timeline together for everything now, but let's start. What's the first time you can remember you had any kind of issues with your hands or wrists at all?
Late 90s, mid 90s to late 90s.
Okay. And what kind of issues were you having?
Just that they would go numb after handling, round type tools and power tools. It'd come and go. I'd shake it off and keep moving.
What would bring that on? What would cause it?
A lot of vibration, say picking and shoveling. If you were picking out gravel and stuff off the roads, using bars to pry the concrete, pick it up, throw it on the truck. I would get it from that. I would get it from the chainsaws. I would get it from the weed whackers. It'd just come and go. It'd be annoying.
What's come and go? Would it stick around?
The pain and the numbness.
Okay. Well, let's start with that. Where in your hands and or wrists would you have it?
In here. In here.
And you're pointing to both hands?
Yeah, both hands.
And when you say it would come and go, what's the time frame of that? Are you talking about it would come and stay for a few minutes and then go away for a while, or
3 to 5 minutes, it'd be gone. I'd just shake my hands, shake them off and go back to doing what I was doing.
Okay. And how long did that last for in terms of that it would come and go?
It just happened a couple times a day when it first started. It wasn't like it was continual.
And you said that started in about the mid-90s to late 90s?
Yeah.
Did you ever see a doctor or anyone regarding it?
Yes.
Who was that?
I saw Dr. Sobchak, and he thought I probably had it.
Sustained.
I was just asking, who's the first doctor that you saw in regards to any pain you're having in your wrist or hands?
I had discussed it with Dr. Wyrick because I was having issues after falling.
That was 1 year ago.
No, before that. Because I had discussed it with him after I started rehab, a little after that.
Did you see any doctors in the 90s regarding your hands or wrists?
No, because personally, I didn't think it was that big of a deal. I mean, I was doing heavy physical work. I mean, you go home every day with aches and pains. Aches and pains from bending over and raking asphalt, the smells from the asphalt, because they're, they give you headaches, that type of thing. It's just like, okay.
Okay, so you're hired in 1984. Say the first time you're having any kind of issues, albeit mild, in your hands or wrists, about mid to late 90s.
Right.
So you're working for the city for at least 10 years before any issues. Is that fair?
15.
Okay. And when you say it wasn't that big of an issue,
right?
What do you mean by that?
Well, like I said, I did all kinds of hand type jobs. I mean, you're going to ache from something. I mean, you put long hours of using your hands. It's no different than, sweeping streets all day by hand,
And I think the
they cramp up, from overuse. And I just figured it's overuse.
And I think the phrase you said was, it wasn't that big of an issue. Is that fair?
Excuse me.
When did it become more of an issue for you?
The last probably 2 years that I was there, it just kept getting worse.
2 years at the city?
That's when it started becoming thinking it was an issue coming.
Okay. So from the mid to the late 90s, you were having some issues.
Yes.
And you testified that any issues that you're having, pain, numbness, would come and go.
Yes.
Correct? At what point do you remember, and I'm not asking for specific dates, but generally, when did your symptoms change at all from coming and going and not being a big deal to you?
would say. I probably noticed it more probably in 2010, 2012.
And did anything at work change around that time?
I can't remember. I'm guessing it was probably riding in the dump truck, or not dump truck, I'm sorry, the garbage truck, holding on to the back of the garbage truck and bouncing, picking up leaves.
And what changed? How would you describe?
The pain started getting worse, and I started dropping more things.
Okay, when you mean worse, do you mean more intense, or it would be there for a longer period?
Longer period of time.
So what kind of period of time are we talking about at this point?
You know, sometimes they would be numb for, 10, 15 minutes. The time period would be worse.
And the way it was brought on, was it any different than before in terms of what kind of job you were doing at work or anything outside of work?
It was just doing the same jobs over and over and over. I noticed it was just the more repetition, more hands-on, more holding things. I just noticed it would get worse.
So your duties didn't change, just your hands
Right.
were just responding to the same job that you testified
Right.
to before.
But I would notice it more at the end of the day. After doing 8 hours of whatever I was doing, shoveling, usually tamping was the worst,
And you testified before that it would go away within a few minutes.
usually.
At this point, before seeing any doctors, how long would it take to go away at that point?
10, 15.
And who's the first doctor then did you see to talk about your wrists at that point?
At that point, that would have to be Dr. Weinberger.
When was that?
Just before I went back to work after the steel plate had been dropped on me.
Well, let me ask you.
June of 2015, 1st of June.
I have the date. Well, let me ask you, did you talk to Dr. Wyrick about it?
I did.
And the reason I asked that is because did Dr. Wyrick refer you to Dr. Weinberger?
Dr. Wyrick referred me to Dr. Weinberger. I was having issues here and there, and I thought that I had messed something up when I fell, when I got my knees crushed, because I hit the ground really hard, and my face kept going numb and stuff. So he thought possibly it was coming from my neck, and that's why he sent me to see a neurologist.
And you're talking, when you say he, you mean Dr. Wyrick?
Dr. Wyrick, correct.
So you saw Dr. Wyrick, you were telling him about the symptoms that you had in your hands.
Yes,
And you discussed the injury from the knees in November 2014 with him.
yes,
And did you tell him all of your symptoms you were having with the hands and your wrists at that time?
yes,
Okay. And we referred you up to Dr. Weinberger, is what you stated.
yes. He sent me to see Dr. Weinberger. The first time I went is, like I said, a day before I went back to work, for a consultation. He didn't really do anything. He just asked me a bunch of questions. And then when I went back a month later, the actual, from riding the zero-turn radius mower and flagging, because that's basically what I did, the symptoms went
And
really bad.
And we'll talk about that. We're kind of getting there. But do you remember the first time you talked to Dr. Wyrick about your hands or wrists? Was it a month, a week, a few weeks before Dr. Weinberger?
Oh, yeah.
Well,
Months.
It was a few months before?
Months, yes.
How did you first start treating with Dr. Weinberger? What did you start seeing him for?
We thought the numbness in my hands and face were coming from my neck.
Oh, no, I get that. When did you start seeing him in general?
Dr. Weinberger?
I'm sorry, Dr. Wyrick.
Dr. Wyrick. I started seeing Dr. Wyrick, trying to think. It's 4 or 5 months after my legs got crushed, because I couldn't walk or drive for 4 months.
So you started seeing Dr. Wyrick for your knee issue?
Yes, for my knee injury.
And what kind of treatment was he giving you for that?
A lot of rehab, stem exercises, ultrasound, a massages, and I was doing a lot of exercising to strengthen my legs back up because I had no strength in them.
And were you seeing any other doctors for your knees at that time too?
I saw, believe Dr. Myers for a while, and then I switched over to Dr. Wyrick.
And what kind of doctor is Dr. Myers?
Dr. Myers is an orthopedic surgeon.
And why did you go back to Dr. Wyrick?
Well, actually, I'm sorry. Dr. Wyrick was actually the person that handled my claim. He was handling my case, but I was already seeing Dr. Myers before I went to see Dr. Wyrick. Dr. Myers treated me in the hospital, and then I went to see Dr. Myers because of my injuries.
So you're seeing Dr. Myers for your knees?
Yes.
And then you started seeing Dr. Wyrick?
Well, I've seen Dr. Wyrick for the rehab.
Okay. And was that rehab being recommended by Dr. Myers?
He recommended rehab, but I don't know if he recommended doing there or elsewhere. That I can't say for sure.
Well, let me ask it this way. So you were treating with Dr. Wyrick for your knees.
Yes.
Was there any other treatment that was going on with the knees as well from any other doctors, or orthopedic doctor, MD, anything else around that time?
Dr. Wyrick also sent me to Dr. Fumick.
And just generally, what other kind of treatment did you get for your knees?
Basically, I was doing rehab and exercises on my own at home to strengthen everything up. I was seeing a pulmonary man. I was seeing the heart specialist. I was going to the Coumadin clinic because I had the clots in my lungs. I was getting treated for my neck again because it got all messed up. I went to a lot of doctors.
All right, so you're treating with Dr. Wyrick for your knees in addition to other doctors.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned your hands issue to Dr. Wyrick, and he refers you to Dr. Weinberger, the orthopedic doctor, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So let me ask you this, because I think it's important to put the timeline together. You're having issues with your hands. You are treating with Dr. Wyrick for your knees.
Correct.
You mention your hand issues to Dr. Wyrick, and he refers you out to Dr. Weinberger.
Yes, sir.
And that is off. And how long were you off of work for your knees? Off of work?
Almost 7 months.
Okay. Why at that time, in those 7 months where you were off of work for your knees, why then did you seek treatment for your wrists and your hands? Why did you mention to Dr. Wyrick at that time and get an orthopedic consultation set up?
Well, I mentioned it, but the problem is I was going 3 and 4 doctors a week, plus the Coumadin clinic. I mean, I couldn't drive for 4 months of it. When I started walking, then my girlfriend was taking me to doctor's appointments, so and she worked, so I was kind of did what I could do. So my hands took a backseat to my knee injuries. I mean, that's best I can explain it.
Your knee injury was, again, November 2014.
Correct.
Do you remember the years, and if the months, if you remember, for your neck injury?
Excuse me, I do not off the top of my head.
Was it before or after your knees?
Oh, I had neck injuries before my knee, way before.
So, again, you sought treatment within those 7 months you were off of work for your knees, correct?
Yes, sir.
During those 7 months, did the issues that you were having with your hands and your wrists, did they get any better or any worse when you were away from work?
No, they stayed status quo. They never, as long as I wasn't doing any type of work, they just stayed status quo. They didn't get any worse, didn't get any better.
And were you still having issues? Was it depending on what you were doing at the house in terms of any symptoms coming on, or?
Basically, I didn't do anything at the house for 7 months, other than get up and go to the bathroom, make breakfast. There was no vacuuming, there was no dishes. If I had dishes, they all went in the dishwasher. I didn't do anything. I sat and watched TV or laid and watched TV, depending on how my knees were. I just didn't do anything.
So it's safe to say you were kind of out of commission because of your knees at that time?
Yes.
Okay. And your hands did not get any better during that time, even though you were off of work?
Correct.
They did not get any worse during that time either?
No, sir.
I just want to talk about some of your hobbies real quick. Do you have any hobbies today?
The only thing I really do is walk a little bit, and I do a little genealogy work. Other than that, that's it.
What does that entail?
I go stump through the cemeteries a little bit, looking for my relatives.
That doesn't involve any tools or anything?
No, sir.
Are you a sewer? Do you sew?
Do I sew? I haven't sewed anything since I was 2 years old when I had to sew buttons on my shirts.
Okay.
No, I don't sew.
Do you crochet?
No, sir.
Are you a gardener?
No, sir.
Are you a baker?
No, sir.
Do you cook most of the meals at your house or no?
Do I what?
Cook most of the meals at your house?
If I cook, it's usually in the crock pot because I'm lazy. That's about once a week, if I'm lucky.
Do you play video games?
No.
Are you an avid typer?
Nope.
So I'll just ask, do you have any hobbies outside of work that when you do them, they routinely cause you issues with your hands or wrists?
No, sir.
And I know we went through your work history, but you've never had any jobs that require any kind of extensive typing or repetitive work other than your job at the city?
No, the last time I had typing, I was a ninth grader in high school.
So let's go back. Dr. Weinberger, the orthopedic doctor. What do you discuss with him?
Dr. Weinberger, I told him, I explained to him that what had happened. I also told him that I'd been in numerous vehicle accidents at work. I let him know that, I had fallen, and I said, I don't know if these issues on my hands are from my neck or elsewhere. I said, but I can tell you my left side of my face keeps going numb and my lips keep going numb. And I said, I have constant pain in my hands where they go numb and hurt and on and on and on.
And you told them how long you were having the issues with your hands?
I did.
And you told them how long you were having issues with the numbness in your face and your lips?
I did. And I actually didn't have any numbness in my face until I fell.
And what kind of fall did you have? You're not talking about your knee injury. That's when the steel plate fell on you.
That's when I fell.
That's the fall you're referring to?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So Dr. Wyrick refers you to Dr. Weinberger. You discussed that with Dr. Weinberger. What does he recommend at that point?
He recommended I go see a surgeon, and I did. I went to see Dr. Weisberger.
When did you see Dr. Weisberger?
I want to say 2019. It was a few years later because I saw Dr. Budson or Buds something. Saw him before I saw Dr. Weisberger, and they both pushed surgery. And I mentioned to them they might want to call Dr. Van Heekeren and discuss it with them or him because he had previously told me no surgeries. And that got dropped real quick.
Well, let's go back to Dr. Weinberger. What did he recommend for you besides seeing a surgeon? Did he do any tests?
He did the nerve conduction test.
So you had the EMG.
Yeah.
I remember when you had that, you saw Weinberger in June 2015.
Somewhere in there. I don't remember exact date.
Does July 2nd, 2015 sound about right? It was about a month after Dr. Weinberger?
Yeah, it was about a month.
Okay. And what's your understanding of the EMG results?
That I have carpal tunnel.
Did you discuss the findings of the EMG with any doctors?
Yes, he showed me.
Who's he?
Dr. Weinberger showed me what the results were, and they were positive for carpal tunnel.
Did you talk to him about any kind of, if any of your issues that you were having that you described to him before the EMG was being caused from your neck injury?
He told me that none of the symptoms that I was having was from my neck. He said, absolutely not.
Sustained.
When you talked to Dr. Weinberger about the EMG results, you testified he referred you to a specialist or told you to go to a specialist after that?
Yes.
Okay. And you didn't see a specialist right away?
No, I did not, because of all the doctor's appointments, all the running around, not enough hours in a day to keep running to doctors. I mean, I was going a lot. Just trying to get my knee straightened down, my lungs straightened out, just a lot of trauma, trying to deal with the trauma and depression and everything else that goes with it.
And you talked to Dr. Wyrick after the EMG, correct?
I did, sir.
Okay. And what did he recommend doing after that?
We kind of agreed to try to see if we can get some cortisone, see if it will help with the flare-ups.
And you didn't get that for some time, correct?
No, again, I was mostly in and out of rehab and seeing other doctors for all the other issues that went on.
So, finalizing, getting close to the timeline here. So, you had the EMG July of 2015. Dr. Weinberger, June 2015. You stated before you returned back to work with the city in June. Is that right?
Correct. I went back to work. So then I also was working on top of all this other stuff of running the doctors.
So you're working. When you went back to the city of Paynesville, did you go back to your normal job?
No. I went to Cemetery and Parks for about approximately a month, which I was put on a zero-turn mower in a cemetery, which cemeteries are pretty rough. They're not very flat. So after being there one day, I got a Baker's cyst in the back of my leg where the DVT had been. So, and I had to go see another doctor for that. And they recommended I take off work, and I said, I can't do that. I've been off work enough. I said, no way. So I went back to work, and because of all my injuries, and it took me a while to get my lung function back because of the massive embolisms, I only worked 4 days a week. I didn't even work 5 days a week after that period, till then, until I retired.
So let's step back. So you returned back to work for the city. I
Correct.
asked you if you went back to your normal position. The answer was no, correct?
Yeah, well, after a month.
After a month.
After a month, they left me in Cemetery and Parks for a month, being a little bit lighter duty than what I was used to.
Okay, and how was that lighter duty? Because I want the jury to understand that.
Well, I wasn't, other than the zero-turn radius mower, there wasn't a lot of vibration on my, there's not a lot of vibration when I went to do tools. So it was just basically riding and the vibration in the mower instead of the vibration of the sewer jets and the other hand tools. And then the other job I did was watering watering plants. And after about a month there, the street department requested that I go back and work with them. And then I was supervising a little bit for about 2 to 4 weeks. You know, it was about 6 weeks, kind of late duty type thing, you know. And I did a lot of flagging, and that, when I started doing all the flagging again, it really flared up again.
What flared up?
Just a regular hand flag.
No, I mean, what flared up?
My wrists and hands.
What did flagging entail? What did you have to do?
You're basically standing in one spot and flagging away, just stopping traffic and moving it.
How long did that go on for?
I want to say about 2 weeks, and then I started going back to breaking asphalt, doing concrete work, pounding in stakes, back to all the vibratory tools and hand tools.
So then you returned, so about a month after returning back to work,
Right.
you returned back to your normal position.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and that month of modified duty, I'll call it, what was that designed to do? Was that designed to protect your knees?
Yes. It was designed to help with the legs, but it actually didn't. The bouncing on the mower, and at that point I didn't have a knee brace, so all the pounding of the riding the mower was grinding my kneecap because I don't have any cartilage left anymore. So all I do is yell and scream at night when I went to bed.
So you went back modified duty for about a month.
Yes, sir.
Testified before, those 7 months you were off, the issues with your hands and wrists did not change at all.
No.
Between working modified duty for about a month until your normal position that you went back to, did the issues, symptoms in your hands change at all? In any kind of way?
They got worse again.
How did it get worse?
Just more pain in here, in both of them, in the palms and across.
So you say
To
more
the
pain.
point I was dropping more things. I couldn't open bottles. I was using channel locks to open my 16-ounce water bottle. It was pretty sad.
So you were having, was it the same symptoms you were having before and more intense? Or
Yes.
you were getting them more often? Or
I was getting them more often and more intense.
Okay. And was it still the same where it would go away after a few minutes?
No, it's continual now.
What changed?
I have no idea. It just doesn't go away.
At all?
No.
Can you, and I don't expect you to know specific date, but where in that timeline, wasn't in the 7 months, it wasn't in the 1 month, where in the timeline from when you returned back to your normal position until you retired at the end of December 2015, when did that change for your wrist in terms of where it was no longer coming and going?
Probably when I started back with the zero-turn mower in the cemetery and parks.
Which was when?
Let's see, it would have been July of 2015.
Okay, so it was during your modified duty, more or less.
Yeah, it didn't help, not my hands.
Okay. Then is it fair to say, I think you testified before, when you went to your full regular job, maintenance worker too, did the wrists, they got worse at that point as well?
Yes, because I went straight into flagging traffic.
And none of your duties actually changed, it was just the same things you were doing before?
Yep. Everything after that 6 to 8 week period, I went back to doing everything I did before. The massive embolisms had cleared up, and I was able to do what I could do.
And you testified before, you retired early in December of 2015. Was a culmination of all your issues?
Yes, sir.
Knee issues,
Yes, sir.
neck issues,
Yes, sir.
low back?
Yes, sir.
Would you lump your hand and wrist issues along with that as well?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you retire, And moving along the timeline, we're getting really close.
Hold
You
on
were-
1 second. Jury needs a break. Where was a good break time?
Might not be, it might be right now.
Okay. So, while on the break, do not discuss the case among yourselves with anyone else. Do not allow anyone to discuss it with you or in your presence. Don't form or express opinions. Don't investigate or attempt to obtain any information about the case outside of the courtroom. Be back in the jury room at 3:05. Record reflect that the jurors are out of the courtroom. I'm going to tell Tony to suggest a number 8 caffeinated coffee. Tony, tell number 8 caffeinated coffee.
I was going to say something too.
Anything for the record?
No, Your Honor.
Okay.
A little longer than anticipated. Guess that's good that we don't have to split them.
Unless he's got like quite a bit.
I don't know. Getting very near the end. I just figured clear a few things up and then cross, so I figured that was a good stopping point. You can have a seat, Mr. Murphy. What's that? I could use a little walk. Yeah, go ahead. I mean, you gave us 15 minutes, so go stretch a little bit. I need to sit up. So we don't know what he's going to do. He has a hard off clock today, he said. So I should only be a few more minutes. He's much more of a talker than I thought he was going to be. So I imagine one way or another we'll have to play at least one video tomorrow. Is that fine?
The one is an hour and 12.
Hour 12?
Yeah, so he has to be out by 4. And it's Nimmer's last to go, I don't know.
Yeah.
We'll get any.
Probably best not to start. I don't want to start and stop.
Yeah.
So.
And Dr. Triangle's an hour and a half.
Is it really that long?
Yeah.
Jeez. We thought they were about the same, but I guess it's not too far off.
It's not.
Yeah, I was trying to guess right. I haven't had a trial with Judge Lucci in a few years. We had one last summer with him, his different attorney. His jury selection was very quick. Ours took a little longer today.
Yeah.
So just try to not make you guys sit around. But
Yeah, not a problem.
you guys been real busy lately?
Yeah, hopefully. If I'm here.
What's that?
If I'm here, we're busy.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah. It's been, I don't know, the next couple of days, we've got several from around the jobs too.
Really?
Yeah, it's good, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
This is Joe, he's one of our trainees.
Hey, Joe.
That's why we're looking to go this new business, we're looking to
Yeah,
get some more,
yeah.
more of the team.
Sue, I'm trying to think. Frank? Is that it?
Frank, yeah.
Frank, yeah.
So we've got our hands full, so yeah, tomorrow should be a problem.
Okay. We'll just play those right off the bat, be good, so.
Sure.
Feel good? I know it's a lot, so. Yeah. No, I wouldn't even say that. It's hard because a lot of the stuff we were saying was based on if we knew what you were already saying. Like, I know what a tamper is.
Yeah, I get it.
But not everyone. So if we just breeze over things, it doesn't help. But no, I mean, it's necessary.
Is it comfortable?
No, it's not.
It's hard.
I just can't find dress shoes that are comfy to stand for so long. My back is just on fire. Yeah, it's going a little more than a year and a half.
This little hill is.
Yeah, we have one for the kid. I do all the cooking, so I wish I could really need one. It helps, but. No, I know you did. That's why I asked you. They said they would. I got it against the pot a few years ago. It's good for a lot. So that's a little more difficult. You could burn a lot of that real quick. Oh, really? If you do, yeah. Oh, I can imagine. I can imagine. Yeah, sure. That's probably better anyway. We weren't going to get both today. I don't like to worry about it. He said, you're trying to this is almost an hour.
Oh, that's right.
Oh, right, yeah. Oh, yeah, I've heard about that. Or no, yeah. But yeah, I had Judge Bell asked me, he's like, oh, so we're trying to find time. He's like, literally said, what's your suggestion? And I said, well, I'm like, my preference really isn't to split up the doctors. And he's like, well, we'll do it too. I don't really care about your preference. He's like, that's for a suggestion. I'm like, it was something.
I was told he was a really good guy. He ran the first time.
He's so nice. He's nice. Yeah. And there's a plaintiff's attorney that I talked to who's friends with him. And she's like, oh, he had nothing but good things to say about you. You know, should I ask him any questions? And she's like, yeah, that's the guy. He wouldn't let us talk to the jurors either. I said, absolutely not.
I mean, I've had them say, I'll go ask them.
Yeah. Say that. very messed up case. And so before I even asked them, they told me, and this thankfully was right what I was thinking.
Yeah.
And they're like, yeah, there's this, and then they're like, but this was the big thing. I'm like,
Yeah, sometimes it's helpful because you have future cases. Sometimes, you know, every once in a while you get the ones where it's like something.
yeah.
I don't know, we didn't talk about this because it's totally up. So none of us thought about it.
Yeah, the one, and it makes sense too. So John had one against the county. I hope Frank doesn't have one. And the issue was, our client like 20 years ago had a back issue. And so you would think, he's like, I honestly don't remember it. What's the full story? He's like, I honestly don't remember. So he testified. He's like, no. It's like, no. And then there's like, well, you had an MRI. It's just like, I don't remember that. And it worked against him because they're like, you don't have an MRI, not remember it, which I could see. Like I was fine, you know, getting one, but I know people freak out. So they're just like,
I don't know if I could use one.
so for him saying like, oh, I don't remember anything about that, instead of making it seem like, oh, it's really not the big deal. They're like, oh, it's really exciting.
Yeah, I can see it depends. If somebody's had a lot of that stuff, then it's one of those money. If it wasn't a big deal, some people are probably like this.
Well, just heard stories about
Excuse me, you may continue.
Thank you, Judge. Mr. Murphy, I think the last question I asked you, or was getting into, was after your retirement in December 2015, how are your symptoms doing moving forward? Did they change at all?
No, they're still the same.
Did they get any worse?
No,
Have they gotten any better?
no.
And testified before that you were referred, or at least recommended to see a surgeon for carpal tunnel, correct?
Correct.
Who did you see?
Dr. Weisberger,
Do you remember when you saw him?
from early 2019 until November of 2021.
So you last saw him about a year ago?
Yes.
So let's go to 2019. What made you decide to finally go see Dr. Weisberger?
I couldn't take the pain anymore.
And
And my claim wasn't being,
I
no,
won't talk about the claim.
okay.
That's what we're here today.
Excuse me, sorry.
So your hands and wrists were not getting any better.
No,
They weren't getting any worse.
no, sir.
Did anything happen in 2019 that made you decide to finally go see the surgeon?
I think in January or something, January 5th or something, I fell. My knee gave out, and I wore a crock pot full of chili all over me.
And how did you fall? What happened?
I fell straight forward. My knee kind of caught and then just gave out, and I fell forward, and it actually landed on my shoulder.
Okay. And so you see Dr. Weisberger,
Yes.
and what was discussed? What did you tell him? Did you tell him about your history of wrist and hand pain, or did you tell him just about the fall?
I told him about the wrist pain, and the neck, the wrist. But I went there from Dr. Weinberger's suggestion to see Dr. Weinberger. It was his suggestion to go see the surgeon. So I went to see the surgeon, and we discussed a few things. Actually, I saw Dr. Bodson first, who's in the same practice, and then I saw Dr. Weisberger, and they both suggested carpal tunnel surgery right off, and I explained to them that I have a blood platelet issue and that I could not have surgery. And that's when they started administering cortisone shots into my hands.
So I'll stop you there. So see Dr. Weisberger. What did he do for you the first visit that you had?
He put shots in my right wrist.
Because I'll tell you, the records reflect you had an injection in your thumb at that time. Is that?
Maybe it was. For some reason, I thought it was the wrist.
But I'll ask you.
You could be correct. I don't have the records. So
That's
I don't
fair.
know.
But I think the main point is, let me ask you, so Dr. Weisberger, you talked to him about the carpal tunnel.
Yes,
Did you talk to him about the positive EMG that you had?
I did.
And that's when he recommended, you said there was another doctor at his office too that
Yes.
recommended surgery?
Yes, they both
Remember
did.
what hospital that was?
Oh, boy. I don't know if they even suggested a hospital, because I mentioned to Dr. Weisberger he should talk to Dr. Van Heekeren, who is the hematologist oncologist, about me having surgery.
What about Lake Orthopedics? Does that sound about right, where you saw Dr. Weisberger?
Yeah, it's 9500 Menor Avenue. It's called the Pink Palace in Menor.
So you talked about surgery. You told them you had a blood disorder, correct?
Correct.
So what treatment have you had for carpal tunnel going forward since then?
Just continuous cortisone shots in my both hands, left and right, which was helping with the pain. I was getting 3 or 4 months relief from it. But then I come up with some other issues.
And we'll get to those in a second. So you saw Dr. Weisberger. He gave you 1 injection.
Yes,
As I said, the records will reflect that was in your thumb. But then you continue to see Dr. Weisberger to get further injections, specifically for the carpal tunnel.
correct.
And that was in both of your wrists and hands, left and right?
It started with, according to what I wrote on my calendar, I got the first 3 were in my right hand. And then the ones after that, I'm not sure if it was both hands because I was getting them both done, or they were alternating, because I didn't write it on my calendar of which one I was getting done. The first 3 I put right hand.
How many do you think you've had altogether?
About 10.
But you at least know for sure you had them in both the left and right
Yes.
side. Do you know for sure that you had them in both the left and right wrist?
I thought they were putting them in the wrist, but if you said he's putting it up in here,
But
I honestly don't remember.
Has it been different locations when you get the injections?
Yes.
Or is it always the same spot?
No, it's different.
Okay. And what's your understanding of what the injections are for?
I thought they were for carpal tunnel because it eased up the carpal tunnel.
That was my next question. So it helps you with the carpal tunnel symptoms?
It did.
And you said you last saw Dr. Weisberger November of last year, so it's going on a year.
Yeah, it was first part of November.
Okay. And have you seen anyone since?
No, because I can't tolerate the cortisone shots.
So what do you mean by that?
Well, approximately, I don't know, a year and a half, 2 years, I noticed I was having problems with my eyesight. So I'm thinking, I'm 60 years old, I'm getting older. They told me, I wore glasses when I was younger, till about the age of 13. So they told me 40 you'll be wearing glasses, 50 you'll be wearing glasses. Well, I didn't need glasses. Well, all of a sudden, about 2 to 4 weeks after getting cortisone shots, I can't see. Well, I can't see clearly, put it that way. You folks would all be a blur. Everybody out there would be a blur. If the sun was just right or it was dark, I couldn't see. And that would last for anywhere from 2 to 6 months. So I started going to see my eye doctor, Dr. Seema Ice, and she says, you have a problem. I go, what do you mean I got a problem? She says, you need to go see a specialist, and she sent me to Dr. Pakadaki, Sophia Pakadaki. I said, okay. So I went to see Dr. Pakadaki, and she says, the cortisone is pooling behind my eyes and making you where you can't see. So I go, okay. So after the neck injections, the hands injections, and knees injections, I was going to Dr. Pakadaki, and it was getting worse. So I said, well, I can't be doing this. So I kind of quit doing the cortisone shots.
And what kind of doctor is Dr. Pakadaki?
She's a ophthalmologist specialist.
After seeing her, did you go back to Dr. Weisberger and explain what you were told?
We talked about it before I quit going there.
You talked about, I'm sorry.
I discussed with Dr. Weisberger, and the other doctors that were, treating me, that I could no longer have, cortisone shots in my neck, my hands, my knees. And Dr. Pakadecki said I could continue to do so, but you're gonna deal with this each time. And I'm thinking, no, I don't wanna deal with this each time, because I can't see, I can't drive. So,
So the last time you saw Dr. Weisberger was about a year ago, as you said. Was that your last injection too, November of 2021?
yes, sir.
Any other treatment between then and where we are today?
No,
Any planned treatment in regards to carpal tunnel?
yes.
And what is that?
I need to figure that out. I'm not sure where to go from here. I just need to figure out who to go see to get some kind of relief.
Has any doctor told you about any kind of relief that you can get?
No. No, because every time I go see anybody with the orthopedic signature, they want to do surgery. They just can't understand that I can't have surgery. And that's what they push every time I see them.
And you testified before the injections were helping for three to 4 months every time you got them.
Yes, sir.
How have your hands been the past year since you stopped getting them? Any
Miserable.
different?
Miserable.
Is anything, have they been worse since before you got the injections? Are they back to where they were before the injections?
No, it's worse.
Worse?
Worse.
In what sense?
They continually ache, throb. The numbness isn't, it's about the same.
And since you first started having problems in the mid-90s to the late 90s, as you testified, to today, at any point did your carpal tunnel symptoms or anything related to those issues in your wrist or hands ever resolve completely?
No.
Mr. Murphy, we're getting down to the last few questions, at least from me. During your 31 years at the city of Painesville, did any supervisor, manager, anyone overhead talk to you about any kind of rotational work program?
No, sir.
There's an objection.
I didn't hear it.
Sorry.
It was very soft-spoken.
Sorry.
Then, because I didn't hear it, my mind didn't register the question.
I can repeat it.
Ask the question again. Don't answer it until I rule.
I asked if his 31 years at work, city of Painesville, at any point, any management, supervisors, anyone overhead ever mentioned any kind of rotational program, rotational work program? I just want to know if he knows anything about it.
First off, you have to define rotational work program.
I'm hoping he knows.
My concern is it's hearsay, whether anyone else spoke to him.
Sustained.
Mr. Murphy, I'll ask you, after 31 years of work, did any supervisor, management, anyone overhead ever talk to you about how to divide up your work duties in a way that would strike that. Mr. Murphy, how did you, at the city of Painesville, how did you know which jobs you had to do for that week?
I were given orders by the foreman and told what I was supposed to do for the day.
Were you ever told that you were switching jobs for that week or that day for any specific purpose?
Hold on.
Hang on.
Sustained.
Try one more time, maybe this time. During your 31 years in the city, Mr. Murphy, were you ever put on any kind of timing limitation for any type of job that you were doing?
Time limit. No, never.
You were never told by the foreman or supervisor, you can only do that job for X amount of hours, and then you had to do something else?
Oh, no, never.
It's just overruled.
And I'm not asking you as a doctor, because you're not a doctor. I'm
No,
not
sir.
asking you from a legal perspective. I'm just asking you, in your own words, what do you attribute your pain in your hands and your wrists to?
What do I attribute it to? 31 years of repetitive motion, pounding and beating and vibrations.
Is there any one thing that you can point to at work that would cause that? Or is it a culmination of everything that you've testified to before?
I would say it's a culmination because most of my jobs involve hand tools and beating, finishing concrete. I mean, where you're doing circles and this and that and running chippers. I would say probably the worst thing actually was the tamping, because in a daytime I could tamp 10,000 times. And that took a toll on my hands. That was probably one of the worst.
What would you consider the most routine or job that you did the most for the city?
I would say it would have to be the continuous tamping all year round.
And one last question. Would you consider yourself a hard worker for your 31 years at the city?
Oh, yes, they even did evaluations from the other workers, and they called me the hardest worker at the street department.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Those are all the questions I have right now.
Grass, Ms. Nemrick?
Yes, thank you. And Mr. Murphy, you went through your job description pretty thoroughly with Mr. Kuzma, so suffice it to say, you did a lot of different jobs as part of your job description, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
You did everything on that Exhibit 4 and then some, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
You operated a lot of different kinds of machinery and equipment,
Yes, ma'am.
drove a lot of different kinds of trucks, snow plows, front-end loaders, dump trucks, all different kinds of things.
I did.
Is that right? And you worked with a lot of different kinds of tools. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, you testified that you first noticed some symptoms that would come and go in your wrist back in the mid to late 90s. Is that right?
Yes.
And you said that you would get some numbness and tingling at the end of a workday. You'd shake them out. After a few minutes, it'd go away.
Yes.
Is that correct? So it was never something that required any treatment?
No, because like I mentioned, it you know, you don't know. You're doing physical work all day long, so things cramp up. You don't get enough water, you know, because, I mean, I'm out in 95-degree weather. The asphalt I stand in is 375 degrees. So, yeah, you look at those things and say, maybe I need a little salt, maybe I need a little water, you know. So you kind of shrug it off.
And so by that time, you had already had some of these other injuries that you talked about with Mr. Kuzma, right, to your back and your neck. Is that right? I think you had
The neck,
mentioned
yes.
the one injury that happened way back when you were working with your uncle,
No, not with the neck. I never had any.
or with your low back. That was a low back
Yeah.
injury. Okay. But you had a number of other injuries to those body parts, isn't that right?
I only had the one working for my uncle. There was a couple in the city that were minor. There was numerous ones I didn't even file on.
But
So-
you mentioned a number of car accidents when you were rear-ended.
I was rear-ended, I was sideswiped, yeah,
And you were getting medical treatment for those conditions, isn't that
I
right?
was, yes.
Isn't it fair to say that you've been getting pretty regular medical treatment for some condition or other for decades?
Oh, yes, every time I get hit, I didn't heal, so I unfortunately had to deal with that.
So you've had treating doctors regularly.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, you first saw Dr. Wyrick, I believe, on January 6th of 2015. Does that sound right?
2015?
Yes. A couple months after
Yeah,
your knee.
yeah, because I couldn't walk, I couldn't drive. That's correct.
And in fact, you were so limited in what you could do at that point when you started seeing Dr. Wyrick that he had to wait a couple months to start active therapy. Is that right?
Yes, because I actually sat in a reclining chair for 4 months because I couldn't walk.
And you saw Dr. Wyrick pretty regularly from January until the time you returned to work in June. Is that
Yes,
right?
ma'am.
And according to his notes, in early May, you reported to him that you were having numbness in your face and some shortness of breath. So-
Yes,
And he recommended you see Dr. Weinberger, who I think is a neurologist. Is that
yes,
correct?
ma'am.
And you visited with Dr. Weinberger on June 3rd, 2015. Is that right?
Yes, I did.
When you saw him, you noted that you'd had a history of neck problems and treatment for years. Is that correct?
Yes, I did. I specifically let him know that.
Okay. And that you specifically had been having pain and numbness for several weeks, and that you were having numbness down your arms and into your hands.
Yes, ma'am.
And he recommended at that time that you undergo an EMG to check for radiculitis or neuropathy.
Yes, ma'am.
You thought you might be having problems stemming from your neck.
That's what I thought it was from.
And he scheduled that EMG for July 2nd, 2015. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And that was the only other time you saw Dr. Weinberger, right, when he went back for the EMG?
I think I went back and he actually told me, disclosed what he found.
So you had a follow-up
Yeah.
shortly after the test?
Yes, ma'am.
And that test was consistent with mild bilateral carpal tunnel syndrome? Is that consistent with your understanding?
Yes, ma'am. He showed me the paperwork and explained it all to me, yes.
And there was a recommendation that you see a hand specialist at that time?
Yes.
But you didn't see anybody else at that time? You
No,
saw Dr.
because-
Weisberger 4 years later?
Yes, ma'am. Correct.
Now, you returned to work from your 2014 injury on June 4th of 2015, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
But you were continuing to treat with Dr. Wyrick pretty regularly.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you remember seeing him the day before you returned to work and telling him that you were a little bit anxious about going back, but you wanted to see how your body would feel?
Yes, ma'am. I do remember that.
You had concerns because of your leg injury and your lung problems and all the complications stemming from that injury, is that right?
Yes, ma'am, because I was actually short of breath and still struggling.
And you returned to work light duty, correct?
Yes,
They
ma'am.
put you on the mowing duty,
Yes, ma'am.
and you said that was for about a month or so that you were doing that?
About a month to 6 weeks, approximately.
And during that time, you continued to see Dr. Wyrick about once or twice a week? Is that
Yes,
right?
ma'am.
And that continued up until you took your retirement at the end of 2015?
Yes, ma'am.
And when you retired through the Public Employees Retirement System, right, through the state of Ohio,
Yes, ma'am, I did.
with 31 years of service.
Yes, ma'am.
And not that it's that significant, but my math shows you had just turned 57 at that time. That's all right, before 1958?
I was 58. Well, I'm slipping. Sorry.
That's all right. Just correct the record there. Now, after you retired, the next medical treatment relating to your wrist was on May 18th of 2016 when you went to see Dr. Wyrick. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
And at that time, you told him that you were having wrist symptoms that hadn't improved since you retired.
Yes,
You
ma'am.
were relating those wrist symptoms back to when you went to work on the riding mower when you returned to work. Is that
Yes,
right?
ma'am.
And at that time, you signed a first report of injury to file a workers' compensation claim. Is that right?
Actually, when I went to see Dr. Weinberger, I filled out a FROI.
May I approach? Your Honor?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy, this is Andy Weston, mark this during Exhibit 1 to help refresh your recollection.
Do you recognize that as the first report of injury that you signed in this case?
I did file one with Dr.
And this is...
Weinberger,
this
because
is-
he gave me the paperwork. I filed it.
Is this your signature on here, Mr. Murphy?
On this?
Yes. About halfway down.
Yes, it is
And
my
you dated
signature.
it 5/18/16, is that correct?
What it says. Yes.
And if you would look up a little further at the description of the injury here, you indicated I returned to work in June of 2015 after a big PDI steel plate fell on me. I was put on a mower zero turn and started having numbness to my hands and started dropping objects because of all the vibration. I went to the doctor with severe numbness in my hands. I have run vibrating tools for 31 plus years at the city. Is that what you wrote on there, Mr.
Yes,
Murphy?
ma'am.
And I'm sorry, your handwriting is actually very easy to read, but I don't have my glasses on, so I apologize for that. And the only other treatment records we have regarding your wrists are notes from your visits to Dr. Weisberger in 2019. Is that right?
I suppose.
So
I mean, you have my records. I don't.
That's when you followed up with
Yes.
a specialist
Yes,
in
I did.
2019. And in his record, he talks about right carpal tunnel syndrome and arthritis of the thumb. Is that correct?
That's interesting. He didn't tell me I had arthritis of the thumb.
And he injected your thumb at that time, right?
He didn't tell me that.
Do you have any reason to dispute what's in his records?
Nope. He's the doctor.
And you indicated you've also had injections for your neck, your back, your knees over the course of time.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, I don't have anything further.
Redirect?
Just a few quick follow-ups. Mr. Murphy, you were asked about the first report of injury. The description that you read, can you just reread the first sentence again?
Put it back over there.
What's,
Are you talking about description of jobs?
yeah,
Are you talking about Joint Exhibit 1?
Yes.
it's the exhibit one that you have, not the description of the jobs.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Okay.
So actually, I'll just read it for you. I returned to work in June of 2015. A big PD steel plate fell on me. I was put on a mower zero turn and started having numbness to my hands and started dropping objects because of all the vibrations. Then you talk about being a worker for the city for 31 years, correct?
Yes, sir.
You're not saying in that description that that was the first time you had any numbness or
Oh, no,
issues with
sir.
your hand?
No.
You're just describing what you were having after you returned back to work with modified duty?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I just wanted to clear that up.
Yeah, the PD is for pounds.
Huh. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, 816 pounds fell on me.
Okay. And just one last question. The gap in treatment from talking to Dr. Wyrick, Dr. Weinberger about carpal tunnel in 2015 until you saw Dr. Weisberger in 2019. There's
Yes.
no other doctors you saw, correct?
No.
Were you still treating regularly for your knees and your neck during that period?
Yes, I was.
If you had to put in order the, I would say, the level of, I'll strike that. In terms of priority in regards to your issues, not downplaying any of them, between your knees, your wrists, and your neck, what causes you the most issues?
Boy, that's a toss-up on what day it is. It all depends what day it is when I wake up. I mean, I do a lot of yelling and screaming at night, I know, because my girlfriend tells me, my friends tell me. Boy, that's a tough one. When the weather changes or the barometer changes, it could be the hands one day, it could be the neck one day, it could be the knees the next. And sometimes it's all three at once.
That's fair. Let me ask you this. In terms of your injuries, your neck, your knees, and your hands, would you consider your knees to be the most significant injury you've suffered in your life?
It's the most, yes, because I almost died from it.
And in terms of the amount of treatment you needed for any part of your body with the knees, be at the top of the list,
Yes.
what would be next, your hands or your neck?
Right now, it would be my neck, because I'm still having a lot of issues with numbness in my face and the narrowing in the, whatever else is going on in there, the headaches and whatever. The hands are difficult because it makes it hard to do things. Just do everyday tasks like, the shower, put my shoes and socks on. It's difficult in that respect,
And you testified before you were diagnosed with your blood disorder in about 2010, 2012?
Between 2010 and 2012, I don't know exactly when, I was in the hospital for one of my injuries, and they took blood and my arm blew up.
And so when you saw Dr. Weinberger in 2015, and he recommended you see a specialist, you were already aware of your blood disorder at that time, correct?
Yes, sir, I was.
Okay. And was there any discussion about any other kind of treatment besides surgery at that time?
No, not at that time. It's more when I went to see Dr. Weisberger, that they kind of pushed the surgery, and then I told them I couldn't do surgery at that time until they figure out what my issues are, blood-wise.
So no time between 2015 and 2019 did you stop treatment on your knees or your neck?
Nope.
And your wrists or hands did not resolve during that period either?
No, sir.
Last question. So you testified about a fall that you had in 2019 regarding your thumb. Did any of your symptoms in your left or right hands or wrists from the carpal tunnel change at all after that?
It just kind of hurt for like a week, and then it
thumb?
went back to normal.
The thumb specifically?
Yeah,
Okay. So you had a different type of pain from the fall.
right.
You saw Dr. Weisberger and had an injection. And then the thumb, has that resolved since?
Yeah, it doesn't. Evidently, I must have caught it when I fell.
So any symptoms you're having in your wrists or hands, those are the same ones present that you testified to before since
Yes,
at
sir.
least 2014, if not before.
Yes, sir.
So the fall did not change your symptoms going
No.
forward? Okay. Those are all the questions I have. Thanks.
Recross? You are excused.
Thank you, sir.
All right, I said that we had a hard break at 4 today. The next two witnesses are the videos, and we know how long they'll be, and that'll take us past 4 o'clock. So we are going to adjourn for the day. Remember, on the overnight, do not discuss the case among yourselves or with anyone else. Do not allow anyone to discuss it with you or in your presence. Don't form or express any opinions on the case. Don't investigate or attempt to learn anything about this case outside of the courtroom. Don't research anything. And be back in the jury room by 8:30 tomorrow morning. We can't start until all of you are here and all of these folks and I are here. So remember what I said, if you wanted to bring in a lunch or something like that, you can put it in the refrigerator. And I'll see you tomorrow. Have a good night.
All rise for the jury.
Excuse me, Your Honor. Can you take these?
No, leave him there. Record to reflect that the jurors have left the courtroom. Anything for the record before I shut the recorder down?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, so tomorrow morning, we're at first, and then immediately following that, after some brief unspoken motion practice, should remember the name. Triangle. I've known him for years, so Triangle. And so they're each an hour and a quarter, something like that.
Hour 15, Your Honor, and an hour and a half.
Okay, so that'll be 2 3/4 hours. That'll take us with the break. I'll give them a break in between the two. That'll take us up till 11 o'clock, and then both sides will have rested by then. I am sentencing the guy who was found guilty of murder a couple of weeks ago at 1:15. So what I'd like to do is line it up so that they go to lunch. They're at lunch when I do that. And so if, even with the morning break, if that takes us to 11 o'clock, I have time to charge them, and actually you have time to argue. And I can just give it to them and send them to lunch, and then it really doesn't matter about the timing in relation to the 1:15 sentencing. So I want to have this case to the jury then by 1 o'clock. And we should easily be able to do that. I may give them a second 5 or 10 minute break after the second video, and then we'll go right, the instructions, they're 9 pages, they don't get any shorter. So I'll give them the instructions and then just go right into argument. So that'll all be accomplished before lunch.
So you would deny my request to put Mr. Murphy back on the stand? I don't think he was on there long enough. That sounds good. I don't anticipate...
How long was he on last time?
Not nearly as long. It was a little more cut and dry timeline.
Those were herniated discs.
Yeah. in the neck and the back.
And I think I went through all his claims.
You're a little bit of
All
a
those
mess,
other factors.
aren't you?
Yeah.
Your Honor.
You wouldn't know, right?
If you worked for the city, you would.
I did work for the city.
I know you did. That probably was.
Were you working for the city when I worked there?
I don't know, sir. When did you?
I worked from 77 to 82.
Nope, you left before I started. I started in July of '84,
Okay.
when they were taking